Okay, so this is going to be a pretty controversial opinion because I'm not the biggest sequels fan, but recently here in the UK, the entire Skywalker saga re-released in cinemas, and I took the opportunity to go and see all of them all over again. And while I frequently rewatch the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, the latter being my childhood trilogy, I don't often go back and watch The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. I don't hate those movies as much as some people do. Okay, maybe The Rise of Skywalker, but I just don't find myself having the urge to do so. So when I went and rewatched episodes 8 and 9 recently in the theatre, I noticed something I hadn't the first time round. Do you guys remember in The Rise of Skywalker, when Hux ends up being a spy, and then he's shot by General Pryde, and Hux basically says, "I just want Kylo Ren to lose"? I'm paraphrasing, but that is the gist. When we first find out Hux is a spy for the Resistance, I was thinking, that is probably the stupidest plot twist they could have ever done. It was absolutely shoehorned in, and 100% thrown in at the last minute. Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams just trying to find a way to make this film a little bit more spicy. And it was even stranger because Armitage Hux, having been raised by Brendol Hux, one of the founders of the First Order, was one of the most dedicated, brutal servants to it. And I was thinking back to episodes 7 and 8 and I was just baffled because he was so arrogant, a fanatical loyalist to Snoke. His dedication to the regime was so extreme, he oversaw the operation on Starkiller Base and destroyed the Hosnian system, killing billions. He was petty, he was ruthless. The previous 2 movies gave us no reason to believe he was a spy or any kind of double agent. He lacked empathy, he was cruel, he was sadistic. Unlike some other spies we can mention from earlier in the timeline such as Callus, Hux was pretty one-dimensional. We were never given reason to believe there was nuance or depth. And of course in The Last Jedi, Hux was the butt of jokes, undermining our perception that he's a threat or a serious villain. So here's where there's a bit of a twist. When I went back and rewatched Episode 7, Episode 8, and Episode 9, I had it in my head, Hux is a spy, but not the entire time. We've got to remember, Hux only became a spy after Episode 8. He turned after Snoke's death. Why? Because he didn't want Kylo Ren to win. You know, we see it throughout the trilogy. Every time Hux has the opportunity to report to Snoke before Kylo does, he's got a smug look on his face. The last thing he wanted was Kylo to become Supreme Leader of the First Order, which he did. Hux was raised from the very dawn of the regime, spending time in the unknown regions with his dad Brendol and Grand Admiral Rey Sloane. As a child, he saw the founding of the First Order out of the ashes of the Remnant. He understood his tasks and wanted to work his way up. We know in Disney canon, from a young age he wanted to become the next Palpatine. He wanted to reach the top, rise the ranks, and achieve ultimate power beyond the wildest dreams of his colleagues. So when Snoke's death took that away from him, he felt almost like a disgruntled employee being passed up for a job he deserved. He couldn't stand to see Kylo Ren take that position. So what I noticed this time watching the movies, in Episode 8, after Snoke's death, the look on Hux's face almost makes you believe he's about to turn. I wouldn't necessarily say there is a logical progression to him being a spy, but it's not as egregious as the first time I saw it. The revelation, 1 movie later, originally seemed absolutely insane, and I will admit, it's still a very lazy choice amongst so many others in this trilogy. Now here's the interesting thing, I don't think we've seen the last of him. The Mandalorian Season 3 Shadow Council showed us his father Brendol, the one remnant responsible for the creation of Snoke. If Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, as they've expressed, want to do more connections to the sequels, we might see a young version of Armitage at some point, maybe in The Mandalorian and Grogu. And did you know guys, when you dive into his backstory it gets very dark. Armitage Hux was born on the planet Arcanis, in 1 BBY. This was during the reign of the original Empire. Hux was fathered by Brendol, though not with his wife, Maritel, but rather a kitchen woman. Brendol was an awful father to Armitage, making no secret of the low opinion he held about his son. He thought he was weak, but not entirely bereft of potential. We learn a lot about him in the Aftermath trilogy, which is where Cobb Vanth originated. Hux's childhood is very tragic, filled with abuse, loss, and indoctrination. It's no surprise he turned out the way he did. But, at the back of his mind, he always wondered if what he and his family were doing was the right thing for the galaxy. Now, one very important piece of source material for Hux's story is the one-shot comic book anthology series named after him in the Age of Resistance collection. This is where we learn why Hux hated Kylo Ren so much. He saw him as an imposter of Darth Vader. One day, while traveling through hyperspace, a shuttle carrying the two characters crashed. They both survived, and Kylo maintains the only reason they survived is because of his command of the dark side of the Force. On the contrary, he said, Hux's survival was entirely an accident on his part. After coming to the conclusion that the ship was sabotaged, the two get into a pretty heated argument, and that is where Hux has the gall to say to Ren, his grandfather Darth Vader needed a helmet to survive, whereas Kylo uses it to hide his face and play dress-up. And the one comment that really got under Kylo's skin was that he uses his mask to hide his likeness to Han Solo, his dad. This absolutely enraged Kylo, who activated his lightsaber and threatened Hux, saying after all no one would find out, and no one would miss him. It's a pretty heated exchange, which few fans know about, unless of course you read these comics. But Hux always said to Ren, if he ever slipped up, if he ever killed Hux, Snoke would punish him severely, and that he was very much needed in the First Order. The last days of General Hux's life were spent under the authority of Kylo Ren as Supreme Leader, and General Enric Pride, both of whom outranked the ambitious officer, who sought to rule the galaxy through the First Order. Pride held Hux responsible for many losses the First Order took, especially with the revelation he was a double agent. I don't think Hux liked the First Order's allegiance with the Sith Eternal very much. He didn't seem to care about the Sith aspects of the regime. He answered to Snoke, he admired Palpatine, but Hux's ambitions were very unique. I don't think the movies did him justice. He's one of the most dislikable characters of the entire trilogy. His jealousy and insecurities caused him to take desperate actions, often with far-reaching, backfiring consequences, resulting in not only his demise, but the downfall of the First Order. In the aftermath of Hux's death, he was remembered by historian and resistance fighter Beaumont Kin. We know this from the new book, The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire. The book notes many of the details about him and his father's lives are pretty much a question mark, especially his father Brendel's death. Again, something that might be explored in the Mandoverse. What do you guys think? And how did you feel about this moment in episode 9? Has your opinion changed on those movies? Let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this kind of video, please let me know. Give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, check me out on socials, and may the Force be with you, always.